So we're gonna get right into it. We're gonna talk about pelvic anatomy 101 first. So I have my handy dandy pelvis here, and we're gonna cover basically the anatomy side of things first, and then we'll get into more of the functional side of things and why you should care about the pelvic floor. So this is the pelvic inlet. So you have the iliac crest here, the iliums, and they connect via here through the pubic symphysis. And then you have in the back, obviously the lumbar spine, you have the sacrum, and you have all the way at the bottom, the tailbone. And the bones are connected via connective tissue, ligaments, fascia, things that essentially help to stabilize the pelvis. So deep inside the pelvis, you will see I have my organs, my pelvic organs. So I'm just gonna take them out. So you have the uterus and vaginal wall, cervix, rectum, and then you have your little bladder. And all of these things sit in the top of the pelvic cavity, and they are protected essentially from obviously the abdominal contents as well as the pelvic floor muscles below. So I'm just gonna dump the pelvis here first. So you're gonna see at the bottom of the pelvis a big old red spot, right? So these are the deep pelvic floor muscles. They sit like a sling at the bottom of the pelvis, and they act to support the pelvic organs, they act to support the pelvis, all of the above. And we'll get into the functions in just a second. However, what I wanna note is the muscular attachments of all of the deep pelvic floor muscles. So you can see on the sides that they're attaching to both the iliac crest, they attach up here to the pubic bone, and they attach all the way back into the tailbone, sacrum. So the attachments alone, want to make sure that you guys know that how important these attachments are, because the attachments attach to sites that other muscles attach to. So you can see by their very muscular attachment sites that they also attach to places that other big muscles attach as well, like the hamstrings, the quads, the glutes, the hip flexors, the abdominal wall. So all of these muscles are very intimately connected with other bigger muscles in the body. So if you see other things with your pelvic floor dysfunction, like hip pain, tailbone pain, maybe even low back pain, you might also know that those two things may be connected. I also want to note the superficial side of the pelvic floor muscles. So these are the superficial outside layers, and these muscle layers are not that functional as much as the deep core muscles are. These muscles, again, have big, large attachment sites as well to the sit bones, the pubic bone, and then they also form a triangle that is known as the urogenital triangle. These muscles, alone from the deeper muscles here, act all together, meaning they provide a ton of function, a ton of stability for the pelvis. And I like to call the pelvis the grand central station of the entire body because it needs to be able to accept load and dissipate force from lower body to upper body and via connection of the trunk. So that's kind of a very brief outline of the pelvic floor muscles. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of what each muscle is called because it doesn't really matter. Your coccygeus versus your pubococcygeus, does it really matter that you know the difference? No. Together, the pelvic floor muscles make up the levator ani group, as well as some of the obturator internus muscle, as well as the piriformis muscle that lies more in the back of the pelvis. Those are your glutes. Those are your hip rotators that often get really, really tight and annoying, and those can pose problems not only in the hips, but also in the pelvic floor. So now that we've covered all of the muscles, let's get into the function. So collectively as pelvic floor physical therapists, we refer to the pelvic floor functions as the 5S functions. So if you can't remember anything, just remember the 5 S's. The first S is support. So the muscles, the fascia, the ligaments, the tendons, everything collectively help to support the pelvis and as the pelvic floor muscle group and help to support the pelvic organs. So they help manage and distribute force from load that's coming from above, from the abdominal wall, from pressure, from big inhales, things like that. The second S is sphincteric. So what that means is they help to contract the urethra, the anus to maintain continence, as well as be able to relax so that way you can void urine as well as defecate on the toilet. The third S is stability. So the muscles span obviously from side to side, front to back, so that way they can help appreciate and anticipate any force that comes from the ground. So for example, when you land from a jump, the force from the ground coming up through the legs, through the pelvis, must be dissipated through the pelvis, up through the spine, as well as to the rest of the body. And that has to be done in a very nice orderly fashion so that way you aren't experiencing pain or unevenness or things. The fourth S is sexual function. So that is more of the superficial outside muscles that provide more of that sexual arousal, orgasmic function. And those muscles alone can get pretty tight. Sometimes they can get dysfunctionized, is that even a word? And sometimes they can have dysfunction from childbirth or episiotomies or tearing, and sometimes even pelvic floor tension can restrict mobility of the clitoral hood, the superficial muscles, the urethra, things like that, which can pose problems with urination and being able to have arousal or an orgasm. And the last fifth S is sump pump. So basically what this is essentially your muscles act as a muscle pump to help get swelling and excess fluid and just get things moving in the pelvis. Because if we didn't have muscles down there, we would have a lot of stagnant tissue. Obviously, there's your arteries and veins that take blood to and take blood from, but your muscles, if there's a lot of stagnant tissue, those muscles need to also be able to contract and relax to help move those arteries, move those veins, and get things back to your heart and get more circulation throughout the body. So it's actually a very, very important function. And if we have immobility of the muscles down there, it's going to be a lot harder for your body to get that fluid out, and you might have more inflammation, more swelling, things like that, especially in women who have endometriosis or PCOS conditions where there is a lot more inflammation in the area. So these are the 5 S functions in general of what the pelvic floor muscles do. Now we're going to get into the day-to-day mobility of the pelvic floor, more of the layperson terms of all of that, so that way you guys can just really understand what the muscles do, why you need to appreciate them, and move about your day. So in general, the pelvic floor muscles, they contract and lift, and they relax and lengthen. And that's what every other muscle in the body does. They are just like every other muscle in the body. However, they are 70% more slow twitch muscle fibers. So you have fast twitch and slow twitch. With slow twitch muscle fibers, they are more of your endurance, long-term event kind of fibers, versus your fast twitch fibers, which are your speed, agility, quickness. And I'm sure you guys understand the difference between fast and slow twitch muscle fibers, because if a bear was chasing you, you're going to be recruiting all of your fast twitch muscle fibers to sprint your ass as far away as you can. Slow twitch, we're talking about isometric exercises. We're talking about long, slow holds. We're talking about holding a muscle for a long period of time. We need our pelvic floor muscles to be more of that endurance muscle, so that way they hold things in place and they are in for the long game to provide continence and things that are actually going to be more long-term activities of daily living, function, quality of life. That's what those muscles do more so than their quickness. However, if you're jumping, running, coughing, sneezing, we need that quickness of the muscles to fire, so that way you also maintain continence if you're jumping and running, or even have a quick cough, sneeze. I also want to note that there's one more function of the pelvic floor. They also do bulge outward. So this happens in the event of vaginal deliveries, where those muscles really need to lengthen and completely stretch and really stretch to let babies out, as well as have bowel movements, as well as have urination. So those types of bulging is acceptable for those types of things. However, we don't want to ever really encourage that motion if we're not doing those types of things, because over time we can actually weaken those muscles, because when you are really lengthening those muscles, a lengthened muscle gets to be one of the most vulnerable positions that it's in. So the more we lengthen and stretch a muscle, the more weaker it's going to get. The last thing that I want to note is we need very good coordination between contraction and lifting and relaxing and lengthening. We need to have very fluid motion up and down of those muscles, just like any other muscle in the body, to be able to respond to daily tasks, daily load, daily volume, and respond with appropriate amounts of tension, right? If we are walking down the street, we need to have at least a good level of resting tension, so that way the muscles are keeping us continent. So we need to be able to have a appropriate resting level of tension, not too much, not too little, so that way we can respond in an appropriate manner if we need to contract or if we need to lengthen. If our muscles are more on the tighter side or the lengthened side, it's going to be a lot harder and a lot more taxing for the body to be able to recruit the muscles because they're more in a lengthened state or they're more in a contracted state. So we need to be able to find that fine balance. Well, talking about balance again. Being able to find that happy medium with the pelvic floor muscles is so critical in order to actually strengthen those muscles and see a difference in your symptoms. So now that we covered the function, the anatomy, and all of the fun stuff about the pelvic floor muscles, let's get into how it incorporates with the diaphragm and how it incorporates with the deep core, and we'll bring it all big picture together so you can understand why talking about breathing is so important, and why talking about strengthening the deep core is also so important, and that way you can see it big picture wise and apply it to your training.